Thank you all again for volunteering your time. We all know this is going to be a tedious process still, and we'll just keep on plugging along. So the first thing we'll do is ask Lindsay to read the roll call.
Summer.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
Casey.
Here.
Huff.
Here.
Ladrum.
Here.
Allender. The Heart.
Here.
Waters.
Here.
Boat.
Here.
Very good. Thank you. You have the minutes of our last meeting in front of you. And I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of those minutes, approving that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Are there any announcements this evening? Nope. Okay. Very good. We should be out of here in about 15 minutes then, the way we're going.
I'll make a motion.
All right. Well, we left off talking about finishing up with section 2.16, which we deleted. We're about to dive into 2.17. Okay. Is there any discussion about 2.17 as pertaining to council meetings and the frequency of such?
I just have one comment. As our structure being a manager, council structure, why wouldn't it be appropriate for the city manager being able to call special meetings? As well as, I think that's just as important as the mayor having that authority.
Any other comment about that?
Do you have that authority now, Mr. Walker?
I do not.
So
it's the mayor or four members of the council are the ones empowered to call the meeting.
Mr. Walker, do you know of any other cities that allow the city manager or administrator to call a meeting?
I have not been able to check on that issue, so I'm not familiar with their process.
Okay. Do you know, has the way this is worded, has it caused any problems in the past?
It can prove contentious, and I'm not opining on if that's good or bad, but there is a natural tension on if there are members of the council that are wanting to meet to discuss an issue, perhaps the mayor is not, then they are in a position of trying to go through that process of finding four members to call a meeting. That's the only tension that I've experienced.
So, have council members, are they inclined to want fewer than four members to be able to call a special meeting?
I have not heard any conversation relative to the number to call a special meeting.
Because that's what it applies to, right?
So if in 2.17, it's my understanding. Mr. Attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is for strictly the special meetings. Any meeting that's not the regular meetings that are called for the first and third Monday of each month. That's our understanding, yes.
Personally, I don't have a problem with the way this section is worded. I think a special meeting it's special. It's outside of the regular two meetings per month, and I think it would need more than two members.
What did you say?
She
Can you not hear
said
me?
that she thinks that a special meeting, especially called meeting, should require the mayor or four members to call that meeting.
I agree. I have no problem with it.
Is there any other discussion about the city manager calling for a special meeting, or do you want to put that? Okay.
That's my.
That's what we're looking for. All right, I'm hearing no motion, so we'll just move on. Section 2.18, ordinances, enacting clause. Simply required wording.
I feel like this is standard wording for ordinances, and I don't have a problem with it.
Just close your quote at the end of it. There's a quotation mark missing.
Oh, no, it's not in the book.
Oh.
It's in the book.
Yeah, it's not in the paper document.
Okay, so it is not missing in the book. Okay, we'll move on.
It is not.
Section 2.19, ordinances confined to one subject and exceptions.
I think it's appropriate. It's required in state statute or statutes, and I believe it should also apply to city ordinances.
Any other discussion there? Moving right along. Section 2.20, ordinances re-enacting and amending. Anything there? Nope. Okay. Okay, 2.21 is ordinances and passage, and it has to do with the number of readings. We probably do want to have a little discussion about this. Our neighboring cities treat this a little bit differently.
I kind of see both sides of this one, leaving it the way that it is, or perhaps simplifying it a little bit. And I'd like to get Mr. Walker and Mr. Langford's input on it. But I know that in Blue Springs, ordinances are generally read twice at the same meeting. But there are certain ordinances that require two separate meetings, and I think some are required by law to have meetings like certain days apart, or readings certain days apart. For example, annexation does. I'm not sure if the budget does, but like I said, I just kind of questioned if it would simplify matters to allow both readings to be at the same meeting. And I know the reason for it is to allow the public time to look at the ordinance, comment on it, speak on the ordinance. So I don't know if that happens. I don't know if if the city does allow the public to come and speak on ordinances. That's my comment.
So just to spark your conversation, a overview of the process right now. The council a few months ago amended their internal rules of procedure. Now we are required to, as staff, to have finalized the council agenda for the next regular meeting 12 days in advance. So 2 Fridays before the next Monday meeting is when we have to have that agenda finalized. So for example, the meeting that is coming up on April 3rd, I believe that would be, the agenda has to be finalized this Friday for that meeting. the council's wanting to provide as much time to the public as possible for them to see what's on the agenda, contact them if they have issues, etc. To Ms. Summers' question, yes, the public is allowed to sign up to speak on ordinances if they would, like to weigh in or provide commentary on that. But that right now, from the time an issue first shows up on the agenda to the time it is finally read, that's golly, let me think about this. 26 days, because you have the 2 weeks between each meeting plus the 12 days that it's in advance. So there is almost a full month's time for an ordinance to be viewed by the public, have an opportunity to comment, etc. And that's strictly for ordinances because of the 2 readings provision.
Right. So if the city continues with its policy of publishing the agenda over a week in advance, that's how the public finds out about ordinances, correct? Usually.
Yes, through the council agenda.
Online. Yeah. So they already have that extra time. My recommendation would be to use Blue Springs policy, and this is what it says. It's very simple. They just, Blue Springs charter says, these readings may occur at the same meeting. Doesn't mean they have to. It means they may.
I disagree. I mean, I think it's appropriate that the public have the opportunity to attend the meeting and make comments regarding the proposed ordinance. And secondly, I think the council members should have time to stew over it and think about it and chew on it. They may change their mind. I don't think that rushing it through on one vote or 2 votes in one day is the way to do that. So I guess I'm proposing just leave it alone.
Zach, the agenda that is prepared in advance, it's also published. Is that correct?
Yes, so with the, we have to have it out now at least by 5 o'clock that Friday, 2 weeks before the meeting. The clerk is striving to have it out by noon that day, just as a courtesy to the council and the public, but it is published online on the city website, and then by state law, a copy is physically posted inside City Hall as well.
So that the public does have those, how many days did you say? 12?
So it's 12
12.
for the next regular meeting.
Les, did I see you have a comment?
I just was gonna comment, the projector's gonna shut off in 22 seconds.
Oh, 18. 17.
Somebody hit the button. The projector is about to shut off.
You have 7 seconds.
I've been curious as to what is the purpose if for example, Blue Springs,
They were right.
if Blue Springs can have 2 readings at the same meeting for passage, what is the purpose of a dual reading? Is that just again to have a reaffirmation, public input time? What's the purpose of that?
They'll have emergency reading if they have to get to in one meeting.
Right.
So they do it anyway. If they need to, they'll do it emergency.
So that's provided 2.22.
It is. Yep. So am I hearing any interest from this committee in making any changes here?
Jackie, didn't you start your comments by saying there are exceptions in state statutes? So if you had to outline those in the ordinance in this particular one, then that would further complicate things, where I feel like if we kept it as is, then it's probably as straightforward as possible.
Right. I think so. Yeah, I just think it, well, for example, if there was an ordinance, there was absolutely no real objection to. For instance, if the city needed to comply with a new state law and had to revise its offense code, because we had to, because we have to follow the state law, why would we need to wait, a month to do that? Because of the readings 2 weeks apart. I guess there's no comment on that, so.
Well, I guess, again, just to restate that, not saying that Blue Springs is the way to go, but in Blue Springs, they say the readings may occur at the same meeting. So I guess we still have the option, and we're going to talk about that here in a moment, about an emergency ordinance still can be read at the same meeting.
Jackie, in the example that you gave, does this language at least give a compromise to the next meeting could be 7 days, so not waiting the full 14 days. It could be the first meeting, and then if there's an emergency meeting that's called for based on that previous one that we said the mayor can call or 4 council members can call, then it could be done a little bit more expeditiously.
Well, I think if it's an emergency ordinance, there's a whole separate procedure for doing those, and I'm not very well versed on what is an emergency. That's coming up. So I kind of look at this differently from an emergency. This would my suggestion to compromise, to allow it to be read at the same meeting, two times at the same meeting, is just to speed things along, if needed. But I'm not going to make that motion if there's no support for it.
John, how do you feel about adding language that gives the council the opportunity?
Tom, I just leave it alone.
Okay.
I don't think it's, I
didn't hear what he said.
The process working.
Yeah, there's no reason to.
Yeah, it says about an emergency ordinance, so we got that covered. So.
For Jackie's sake, try to talk into the microphone. I know you have to share one there, but they're all saying that they don't see the need.
Okay,
Can I paraphrase that?
thank you. Was this? I did have another note about this section. Does it have something about keeping records?
Yeah, the second paragraph has to do with bound volume again, and the fact that we probably should adopt the same language that we did in earlier paragraphs.
Yeah, to allow for how did we word that? Allow for. I can't remember. I don't have the red line copy with me, and it's not showing up on Teams. So, Lindsay, do you know how we added that at the last meeting?
Just a second.
It's in paragraph, in section 2.12, physical or electronic.
Right, simply by the addition of a, in parentheses, physical or electronic.
Yeah, I would recommend we add that. I'll make a motion to add that.
Okay, we have a second from John. Any further discussion? And maybe we talk about the exact language. So, and it shall immediately be placed in a bound volume, in parentheses, physical or electronic.
Yes. I think that's good.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of that change, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so on to 2.22. I'd like to ask Mr. Walker, what's the purpose of having this very specific list? And can we really cover this a little bit more wordsmithed?
I don't know the history, but the specific list, as I understand it, works in partnership with Section 2, which is all other items go into effect 10 days after they've been adopted by the council. So whether that's to give some sort of cure period or an opportunity to make a motion to reconsider an ordinance at the next meeting of the council, I'm not quite sure what the full history or intent was, but Section 1 is providing the council the enumerated list of items that will go into effect immediately upon their passage, whereas all other items would have an effective date of 10 days from passage by the council.
I think that that's unnecessary. I don't know why an ordinance would not go into effect immediately upon approval and signature by the mayor. If there's a certain ordinance that you want to take effect on a certain date, say August 28th when the statute changes, then you can put that in the language of the ordinance. But why would anything else need to wait? The way I read it, it seemed like it was because of possibility of a referendum petition being filed. But I still don't understand why it shouldn't go into effect immediately. Because a referendum petition would stop it if it was successful without this. I thought it was very complex and unnecessary and odd.
Yeah, I have to agree. I believe that the wording could be really simple, and that is that the ordinance would go into effect immediately or at a date specified by the ordinance. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, so at least some there says if they're effective immediately upon passage, adoption, and approval by the mayor, or a later date specified therein. And Blue Springs says every adopted ordinance shall be effective immediately upon passage, adoption, and approval by the mayor, or any later date specified therein. About the same. And I would move to amend that section to simplify it and use the language of either of these two cities.
And would
Okay,
that
so I've
simplify
heard a
both-
motion.
Sorry, would that simplify both sections 1 and 2 under 2.22?
1 and 2, Jackie?
I'm looking.
Okay.
This is-
Yes, I think so.
This issue about referendum, did it ever come up? Mr. Walker?
I'm familiar with one time in my career. I can't recall if there's been more. The one time in my career that I can recall was council adopted an ordinance to approve the automatic meter reading program, and an initiative petition was filed, and this process triggered, went into effect, where then the voters had the 31 days to get their signatures. That's the one time in the 7 years that did occur. Yes, sir.
What's the process?
Oh, so at that point in time, the council has to decide if they're going to adopt the initiative petition as is by, abandoning the ordinance they originally passed, or placing the matter before the voters as the initiative petition called for. In that circumstance, the council opted not to have an election and rescinded their ordinance, essentially in effect adopting the referendum that the voters had put forward.
And Mr. Walker, don't you think that could still happen, even if the ordinance had been adopted and signed?
It wasn't adopted.
They can still be rescinded.
I don't think so.
And there's a procedure for reconsideration. It's kind of a touchy way to do it, but it can be done.
I don't really see a problem here. I mean, it says when the ordinance goes into effect, it says the citizens have 10 days to file a referendum petition, and then the city council determines whether it will go before the voters or not. I mean, it certainly gives the city council the opportunity to think it through and decide what they want to do. I don't really see a problem with that.
You don't see a problem with the way it's worded now?
I do not.
Did he say no?
He did. But John, are you talking about just the wording that has to do with the referendum, or the entire?
I'm sorry. I'm reading all of paragraph 2 under section 2.22. I do make mistakes, and sometimes my interpretations are suspect, but the way I read this is that it goes into effect within 10 days unless there's a referendum petition filed. And then according to Mr. Walker, am I reading that correctly?
That's, yes, my understanding, sir.
Then if that happens, then the city council will make a determination of whether the issue, the ordinance goes into effect or it's submitted to the voters. That's the way I understand it.
I don't see any reason why a referendum petition cannot go forward after an ordinance has been adopted. I don't think there's anything in the law that says it can't.
And
I don't think, but being candid, I don't think this is a necessary delay in an ordinance to give the citizens of the City of Independence a chance to file a referendum petition. And I don't see this being a big hurdle for the city. And waiting 10 days doesn't seem to be a big deal to me.
Are we aware of any hardship that 10-day wait has caused over time?
I'm not aware, because in circumstances where we have needed something to occur right now, that emergency provisions, what we requested of the council. Case in point, last night, we had received notification from the Missouri Public Service Commission of a gas tax increase, and we needed to pass an ordinance to preserve our portion of the franchise fee that comes to the city, and had to do so by this Friday. State gave us a lot of notice, so we asked the council to enact that emergency provision, which they did.
But it really could be worded, though, so that the ordinance goes into effect immediately, but then give the council the opportunity to change or set a date for whatever that might be, 10 days, then that can still happen.
Well, I know where you're going from. I'm just Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that
Sure.
through. You're saying that you suggesting that the ordinance go into effect but still have the referendum opportunity for the citizens?
Right, right. We use similar language that the ordinance would become effective immediately upon passage, adoption and approval by, and probably we should use presiding officer because that would be some continuity in wording, or at a later date specified therein, and that later date then gives the council some flexibility.
And Mr. Chairman, just to help maybe piece a little of this together, later in the charter, we come to Article 7 that talks about this whole initiative and referendum petition. And it does state, concurrent with this section 2.22, that the voters, the citizens have 10 days after an ordinance is adopted to initiate that process. So whether in my mind, whether the ordinance is effective that night or whether it's effective 10 days later, if the voters are still afforded that 10-day window to bring forward the initiative petition process, the effective date really is inconsequential.
Okay.
It would certainly give us advantages, if they chose not to initiate a referendum or initiative petition, and that it's now on the books, we can move forward. We don't have loose ends hanging around out there. But as long as this 7.3 is still in effect, voters are still going to have that opportunity, 10 days window to make that process advance.
Good. I don't think this committee wants to remove any checks and balances, especially from our citizens. I think we can all agree to that.
Okay.
John, does that answer? Do you feel like that answers your concern?
I think I agree with Mr. Walker. I do. And it's been a while. It's been a few days since I read section 7, but I went back and looked at my notes.
Okay.
And that's exactly the notes that I made when I read that section before.
So Jackie did put out a motion that would change wording, both paragraph 1 and 2. I did not get a second. Is anyone interested in a second so we can discuss further?
I'll get a second.
Okay.
So we can discuss it.
Okay, great. So, Jackie, which wording do you want to present in your motion?
I move that I think the Blue Springs language, which is every adopted ordinance shall become effective immediately upon passage, comma, adoption, comma, and approval by the mayor, comma, or any later date specified therein.
Jackie, what page is that on of their charter?
In Blue Springs,
Yes.
it is, sorry. Sorry, I didn't write it down. Can I get back to you on that if you want to move forward? I don't. There it is. Oh, no, that's not it.
I wanted to clarify one thing, and I don't know if you need to amend. I might need some help with parliamentary procedure here, but the paragraph right before section 2.22, it includes signed by the presiding officer. I think that instead of mayor, it should say the presiding officer in this.
Oh, okay. Who does sign ordinances for independence?
Would that be the mayor or the mayor pro tem?
In the absence of the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem or whoever is presiding at that meeting.
Okay.
Presiding officer.
Presiding officer, yeah.
Grand Poobah, whatever you want to call
Pardon me?
it. Grand Poobah, whatever you want to call it.
Right. So Jackie, do you want to amend that to include the presiding officer? Or do you want to keep it
Yes.
as the mayor?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it probably should be presiding officer. Okay, here, Lindsay, in Blue Springs, do you have the charter book?
Yeah, I have the online version pulled up.
Okay, it's 3.12J.
Got it. Thank you.
Except for changing mayor to,
Presiding
I
officer.
forgot it already.
Presiding officer.
Yes.
So for clarification, that sentence will replace all of section 2.22. Then the referendum will be addressed later in section 7.3.
So take out both paragraphs.
Correct.
Yes.
I'll make my last objection and keep my mouth shut. I'm a firm believer in the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there's nothing wrong with what's here. It's working. I've already stated earlier that I don't see there's an onus on the city for waiting 10 days to see whether there's a referendum petition. And then let the city council make a decision at that time. And there's, as pointed out earlier, there are provisions for emergency ordinances. That if there's an emergency, okay, we can get around 10 days.
Okay.
So that's how I feel.
Further discussion, please.
Could I have a microphone?
Microphone.
Good point. I'm all in favor of simplifying this thing so that it's much easier to read rather than looking at 2.222 and then, oh no, well, it's repeated at 7.3. I'm all in favor of wherever we can simplify it, we need to simplify it, particularly for me.
Very good.
Thank you.
The way I'm interpreting the conversation, and that's really the major benefit right there. It's going to read more simple. You're going to lose words because the essence of it is being handled somewhere else in here. You think the citizens and the council are going to read it as that, or are they going to see what we just swiped? Is it because they have to agree with this? So that's my only hanging chad, if you will, thinking about that. Because you're right, it seems to simplify it. It's going to be addressed somewhere else, but we're taking out some significant words here. I hope that they know to look back there to see that they still have an opportunity. Efficiency, I don't think is going to be hurt because it sounds like we're already kind of in this limbo, 10 days waiting anyway. So we're not going to be doing work over. We're just hanging out and waiting if somebody's going to file a referendum. So I agree. I think it's going to look cleaner, nicer. I hope everybody will accept it as such.
Well, we've shortened it, we've cleaned it up. Do we need to put some reference over to 7.3 for a referendum? I don't know. Are people going to know to look somewhere else? How do we resolve that? They're going to say, well, it doesn't say. Well, it does, but it's somewhere else.
I think that makes it a little cloudy if you do that. I agree that it might. I think it's in the presentation of when we finish up here and I'm assuming we go to the city council and discuss the amendments that we've approved, that we're going to explain why we made this change and that we feel like it's kind of the referendum petition is already handled. This doesn't really affect that process at all. by making this change. And I think if the city council understands that, it can be presented to the voters in an educational way also.
Yeah, look at the complexity of this list. These will go into effect immediately, but then if they don't go, if this ordinance doesn't apply in one of these categories, then it's 1 minute after 12 midnight on the 11th day after the date of passage. However, if prior to 5, that's
Yeah, it's confusing. I've never seen one like this before.
Scavenger hunt. I'm
Right.
already lost.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Okay, so but we've had enough. I think we've had enough discussion that we probably should call a roll for the vote, please.
Sure. Summer,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Casey,
Yes.
Huff,
No.
Latham,
Yes.
Allender,
No,
The Hart,
Yes.
Waters,
Yes.
Boatright.
Yes.
It passes.
Thank you. Okay, section 2.23, emergency ordinances.
I don't have a problem with 2.23 the way it reads.
Any other concern or comment? Nope. Okay. Moving along, 2.24, ordinances, adoption by reference.
I thought this was a little hard to understand the way it's written. I had to read it a couple of times to figure out what exactly it was dealing with, and I believe it is what the model charter calls codes or technical regulations. And I don't know if I'm the only one that had difficulty understanding what this was trying to do. So in 2.16 of the model charter, I think it sets it out a little more clearly. I think I printed that out for you, Mr. Waters.
Yes. 2.16. Does everyone have the model charter look at page 24?
I can pull it up.
You can pull it up,
Yep.
awesome.
Page 24, Mr. Rogers.
Yes. So yes, the section as in the existing charter, City Council may adopt by reference with or without modification codes, ordinances, standards relating to building, plumbing, electrical installations, milk and milk products. It seems like maybe this was created in a different era, obviously.
Yeah. It's a little dated.
Yeah, right. The model code would have,
2.16 in the model charter, it's more generally described because I realize it's an important concept to be able to adopt that because we don't want to adopt the entire fire code or public works standard. I don't even know what all we've adopted, but I think this describes it better.
any comments? Any interest in changing to the model city language? Mr. Walker, do you see any concerns about changing this language?
No, I think this is another example of where the charter was written, as you said, in a different era, and streamlining and simplifying intuitively makes a lot of sense to me.
I'll make a motion that we delete 2.24 and replace it with the language in 2.16 of the model code.
I'll second so we can discuss.
Great, thank you. So we do have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on that?
Is this the bottom?
Can we look at the language of the 2.16 on the model code? Because I think what was projected earlier was, I guess it was 2.
I think it's 2.15 in the model code is the emergency ordinance.
We've already accepted emergency ordinances.
How would you make any changes there?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll pay attention next time.
Okay, we'll write that down.
What about the last sentence? Copies of any adopted code of technical regulations shall be made available by the city clerk for distribution or for purchase at a reasonable price.
Yeah, I think we could probably change that. I mean, if we were going to provide a paper copy, we would be bound by Sunshine Law B, I think. Might need Mr. Langford's opinion on that.
Jackie, I think you're right about that.
You want to just end it after made available by the city clerk?
Right now it says, and shall be open to public inspection from the city clerk office, so you could do either one of those,
Mm-hmm.
quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then let me amend my. Are we at the second of the motion?
We did get a second, yes.
Can I amend it? Can I amend it at this point?
Yes. We're seeing a
Okay.
nod.
Okay, so the last line of the model code 2.16, after the term city clerk, add
For public inspection.
and shall be open to public inspection.
Okay.
Are we adding all of 2.116 or just that?
That's the motion at this point. Except for a change in the last sentence. After city clerk, it would say that again, Jackie?
After city clerk, it'll say, sorry, and shall be open to public inspection.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go back in and type all this because it's.
Or, and, I don't know. I can't remember what I said first time.
That is what you said.
I can't see what you're typing. It's not on the Teams screen, so does it let me know if that looks right?
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, well, and it also references 2.14 as the ordinance section. That's not where we're at.
Oh, yeah, we need to change that to good catch. And we may need to rework this a little bit. Is that referencing the adoption of ordinance section?
Yes. It's
So 2.21?
it's
Yeah,
the
it should be
ordinances.
2.21.
No, I'm sorry, Jackie. It's the ordinances in general. The form of the ordinance. So that would be. What would that be?
I don't either. For distribution and filing of copies. I think it refers to our 2.21. I don't even know if it's needed.
Well, number 2 references 217A, which changed to.
Oh, okay. So that's
Yeah, these both have
They both reference.
the distribution and filing of copies, and then the number 2, a copy of each code. It's to be recorded by city clerk.
Might it just be easier to find the old language out of 2.24 and adjust it? That you felt like needed to be brought into the 21st century?
You might be right.
yeah.
Or you could just stop it after city clerk and then they put the one phrase we're putting in there about electronic or whatever. Because it says recorded by the city clerk.
Mr. Langford or Mr. Walker, how does the city adopt a technical regulation? When it's, let's say it's updated. Say there's a new version of, I don't know what to call it, but just as an example, a fire code or something like that. Does that have to be adopted by ordinance?
The example that's coming most readily to mind, Ms. Summer, is when we've updated the different building codes, so electrical code, plumbing code, etc. And in that process, that is ultimately updated by ordinance, adopted by the council. There's any manner of public hearings, etc., that take place in advance of that, but ultimately it is an act of the council to update ordinance pertaining to that section of code that has been handled by council.
I assume that's done fairly regularly.
Yeah, property maintenance, so code enforcement, things, tall grass and weeds, etc. That's typically adopted and refreshed every 2 to 4 years. The building maintenance code is on a similar cycle in that 2 to 4 year window. So yes, I would say within every term of each elected official, member of the council, that's something they routinely deal with.
I think Carmen has a great suggestion. We can probably achieve what we want by simply changing a little bit of language, starting on the current language, starting with codes, ordinances, standards, and regulations relating to building, plumbing, electrical installation, milk and milk products. Change that to standard code of technical regulations.
Okay, so beginning where and ending where would it be deleted? Would we delete what we've got?
Yeah, in the first sentence, starting with the word right after modification, starting with codes and ending with products, milk products, that would change to standard code of technical regulations.
I think that's a great idea. Yes, I like that. I withdraw my motion and my amendment. And move to make that change that Mr. Waters just suggested.
So when we continue that, strike through after milk products and any other and all matters and subjects?
No,
to
that would
period,
remain.
leave that in there?
That would remain.
It seemed like the language of the last sentence we all, or I guess we were agreeable to, shall be kept in the city's clerk's office and open to public inspection.
Correct. Okay, so that is a motion. How about a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Les. Any further discussion on that? All in,
I understand what you're saying. You're amending 224 to read like that, but the rest of the language out of the model charter, that's not going to be it, right?
that's correct.
Right, we're gonna remove this.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. That's in there.
Thank you, Lindsay.
She's doing very good at it.
I'm gonna miss that section.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. Section 2.25, ordinances codification.
I questioned this because it only requires codification at least every 10 years. So does that mean the version that we look at when we go onto the city website, is that the codified version? Or does it mean the published? I guess there's big notebooks that have all the codes in it, right?
You're correct. The codified version is the version that we are routinely updating on the city website, and then every so often the city clerk is having a new physical copy printed, but trying to keep up with making sure those amendments as they're adopted are reflected on the electronic version.
Okay. So Mr. Walker, do you think 10 years is kind of a long time to wait between actual codification?
I do.
does it happen about every 2 years? You know, I know you have to pay someone to do it, probably.
Yeah, we contract right now with a company, and they charge us by the page, and I don't remember the amount. It's not egregious in my opinion, but it's it's how they make their money.
Right.
If I had to speculate, when this was put together in the 60s and 70s, there wasn't that electronic option, so printing a new copy was probably a more laborious task. So 10 years might have been more cost effective, but given the efficiencies and technologies we have now, I think a far more truncated timeline would be easily administered by staff.
Would
I have a question.
does anyone have any suggestions? I mean, the 2 years for some reason was what I was originally thinking, but I don't know if that's reasonable or not.
I question why we need to print it out at all.
I don't know.
I think if it's on the website, you can print it out and it's up to date. It's not 9 years and 11 months old. To be the most
I
accurate,
know.
it
I
would
never
be
looked at that. I never opened that book. Never.
And if there's
I always went blind.
and if a citizen is interested in a certain section, staff is able to print that off for them
Yeah.
as well too.
would they do a request for information?
They could do a records request, and as long as they weren't wanting the entire code printed,
I
that's
think this was probably put in before
Exactly.
we had the internet.
exactly.
Well, I don't understand the need for a printed copy.
I don't know either. I guess there's no. Is it anywhere else in the charter that this is required? I'm just throwing that out. I have no idea, but Mr. Langford, do you know of any legal requirement to have a printed copy of the code? I know you have to have certified copies sometimes in court.
You can get certified copies from the city clerk's office for specific
Right.
parts of the code. That doesn't have anything to do with this. I don't know of any legal requirement that, this was written, like we've been discussing, 50 years ago, when the only way to have an actual copy, when I started working at the city, I was given updated versions of different ordinances that I put in 2 big notebooks. And that was 20 years ago. I don't know of any legal requirements. And this to me is just an outdated section of the charter.
I think so too, but I don't have any suggestions right now on how to change it. I didn't do that in preparation for this meeting.
Well, I think we could probably use similar language we've used a couple of times now, and that is right after published, then you add in parentheses printed or digital. Drop the book or pamphlet form, and then if we want to change the requirements from 10 to 2 or whatever the script thinks.
I also didn't know if you could say shall be accessible online or upon citizens' request if they're going through the clerk to get a printed copy.
Mhm.
So just where it says the permanent general ordinance of the city shall be, and then change the wording to be accessible online or at a citizen's request, something along those lines.
I think that would speak to the charter here, the model city, because they're saying this is so that things are just not lost and unavailable to your citizens that are often out of print, unavailable, or difficult to find. You're saying they're online and they're available with your statement.
And that next line, I don't know if we want to keep that language, the ordinance and parts of ordinances included in the code may be, because I feel like this is where it keeps us timely, be revised, rearranged, and reorganized, or are we wanting to strike that as well? Because I didn't know in terms of like the pieces of it being regularly updated if we want to have that
language in there.
Again, just to draw attention to this model, it says that within 3 years after adoption of this charter and at least every 10 years. So they do specify some in-between time there, if that's of interest.
Why couldn't we just say, and take out the 10 years and just say periodically?
I suspect there's a state law that has some impact that requires cities to maintain records.
Yeah.
Yeah, 25, page 25 of the model city
Yeah,
says.
I just read that card.
Yeah, I think you're right.
My sniffer, I smell it.
Your sniffers, I think, right.
So I suspect that there's some state regulations regarding cities
Or was.
maintaining their
yes.
records. I suspect there is. That's all I got. I mean, I could do a little research. I probably won't.
Is this something maybe we could ask legal counsel to research and then come back to it, or do you want to go ahead and look at revising it tonight?
I think it's would be a good idea to get a legal opinion about this, because if there's a state statute that requires the cities to maintain certain records, then we certainly should comply with it.
I haven't looked at the Blue Springs or Lee Summit charters. Do they have any reference to the codifications? They're newer, so they may be more in line with state law.
Here, 3.19. Blue Springs just says each year, all ordinances of the city of a general and permanent nature shall be reviewed. Recodification shall be periodically supplemented and updated at the discretion of the city clerk. I have to be Summit here.
Simple.
Another question I had, and I think this might be something coming up, is this the responsibility of the city councilor or the city clerk? Because I think it says city councilor, which I was kind of questioning that.
That's traditionally been the city clerk.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I might have read it wrong. It makes sense for the city clerk to do it, I believe.
Any consensus on any of that language, or want to get another opinion? Do a little research.
I'd say do a little more research.
Might be a good idea.
I'm okay with that.
I think we are gonna wait.
Okay, I'm not finding it at least Summit, but it's probably there somewhere. Make a note that we're going to come back to that.
I think the language that Jackie shared from Blue Springs is worth considering when we revisit it, just because I felt like that was pretty simple.
I do too.
Okay. Okay, I'll if you want me to send it out, I can. Or Lindsay can.
Yeah, please. Okay.
I'm just making a note for next meeting.
2.26 has to do with the independent annual audit. We've already had some discussion on this earlier. And the only glaring change is in the very last sentence, where we're changing the city management auditor to city internal auditor.
Right.
Were there any other changes this group wanted to consider?
I didn't have any. I didn't know if we wanted to, if Mr. Walker wanted to weigh in on it, or Mr. Langford.
independent annual audit is extremely important, probably one of the fundamental activities that we do as an organization to ensure via an outside third party that we are in conformance with governmental finance best practices, that our financials are being managed accordingly, and to give the community and the council that assurance that that is happening. So I think this section is essential. The only feedback I could offer is I did note in 5.11, which I think is page 41 of the model charter, it seemed to make reference to both the financial audit and the council's responsibility for doing performance audits in one section. So I didn't know if there were an opportunity to combine those two sections or if that's too much perfection. But I would advocate that annual independent audit is an essential local government responsibility.
Are you talking about our 5.11? Is that what you said?
No, the model charter 5.11, which I believe, if I'm reading page numbers correctly, is 41.
And how does that differ from our 2.26?
Well, not significantly, and I don't want to confuse the matter much. I noted in the commentary section, the very last paragraph of that commentary section mentioned that the council also has responsibility to institute performance and management audits. So I didn't know if there were any value in trying to wordsmith a merger of 2.6 and 2.7, but honestly, Jackie, I think that's probably making great the enemy of good, frankly.
I see. Okay. I understand now. Well, I don't know that would achieve any simplification.
Upon further review, I don't believe so.
I'd make a motion, we leave this and just change the wording down low where instead of management, we put internal
Okay,
auditor. I mean,
Alright.
I think this needs to stay.
I've got a motion. Did I hear a second? I have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Very good. And then section 2.27, the annual evaluation by council. Again, we discussed this earlier. I feel like we, as a group, felt like that this was an important paragraph, that we didn't see any need for any changes here. Anybody have any difference of opinion there? Okay. Somebody send up some flares. We have achieved section 2. Congratulations.
I was looking at that, but, section 215, as I understood, we left this with, we had further discussion, something about penalty provision. And this may not be the appropriate time, but I think, at least my understanding was that we were going to come back to that sometime.
I agree.
This is not fine.
Don't send the flares up quite yet. Yes, I agree.
Darn it.
We were gonna do that, and then
Gold flares.
We still have to do
You gotta
2.25.
celebrate the little bits.
Little, take a
Little one.
little victory. A little bottle rocket, I would bet. All right. So we do obviously still have time on our planned agenda tonight. The next section is lengthy. There's a lot to consider. I'd like to know from this group, do we want to begin in the section? Do we want to call it a night? Do we want to have maybe some discussion about it without maybe some overriding discussion? I want to hear what you all think about moving forward.
I like the idea of the discussion.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I like the idea of a discussion.
Okay.
Sorry, Patrick.
One item that I noticed on discussion was on 3.1, it takes 5 members to hire the city manager. But then I kind of read down lower, it takes 4 to get rid of him. I don't really understand that. I mean, I guess if you made one guy mad, you're out the door if you had other 4 votes or something like that. Why wouldn't it stay 5 and 5 or 4 and 4?
A super majority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Walker's the best interest in this.
Well,
I'd say 3.
I've got a vote for 2.
I was thinking 3.
The city manager can vote in that role.
Is there a reason why that, Mr. Walker, why it takes 5 to hire you? Or hire the city manager and then?
Truly, I don't know, and I have found it curious that it's harder to get hired than it is to get fired.
Well, back to the discussion idea.
Yes.
I think the overall premise that we've been discussing is giving the council and the city manager more power, whether it comes to running the operation. And that's what chapter 3 basically is running the city. I hope that we focus on giving them the power, not just pointing to Zach, but giving them the power to run it, but also have the accountability with the results. And right now, I think what we have and it's going to be very difficult later on in some of these articles to just let it be a charter violation or let it be something, and it restricts their ability to actually manage. And I think that's important that we keep that in mind when it comes to different departments, different administrative areas. It should be Mr. Walker and the council's decision on what to do, rather than you can't do this, you can't do that because it's in the charter, it's not in the charter. It basically is, we need to open up the books to them to let them run the show. And I think that's what they've done in the model unit also, model charter.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to Commissioner McDonald's, the memo that I gave the commission back on February the 16th, I mentioned Article 3 in administrative departments, and Mr. McDonald is right. It's been very cumbersome at times when we feel like we've come up with some innovative ideas about how to gain efficiencies through the consolidation or combination of departments, or if in fact we thought maybe we needed a new city department. Imagine if the United States Constitution enumerated out all of the departments of the federal bureaucracy, and we as voters of the country were trying to adopt or adapt that, I should say. It's proven difficult for us, and I'm not saying government should be easy. I mean, I know there are those hurdles on purpose to slow things down and make things be thoughtful, But by the same token, there's been time. I mean, a perfect example in here, we call for a public works department. Well, through consolidation and combination, we now have a municipal services department that represents what used to be 3 city departments down into 1. Are we in violation of the charter? I don't know. We don't call it public works, and we've combined different functions, but we've also saved the taxpayers a lot of money by consolidating and combining some of those functions. So having that flexibility across councils, across generations would certainly, in my opinion, provide that ability to innovate and look for those economies of scale.
If I could speak, I kind of touched on this at our very first meeting, that I can't see who's speaking, but I believe it's Mr. McDonald made the first statement. Is that correct?
Yes.
I 100% agree with what he said.
Okay.
I don't feel like the charter is the place to describe and set policy and create departments. I think that should be the city manager, perhaps the city council's decision, and not have to require a vote of the citizens to make changes of that nature. And that's what's required if those are in the charter. So I did, in my little bit of research I did on this. First of all, the model charter has some real good language in it. It's 4.01. So if you haven't looked at that, this is just a discussion, I believe, tonight. You might want to look at it before the next meeting. I looked at the Lee Summit Charter. They do not have any departments at all in their charter, except for their law department. I don't know why law department is in there, but it is. Blue Springs doesn't really either.
The law department.
And so the model charter generally gives the city the power to establish departments, offices, and agencies. And that's my opinion. I have a question that I'm going to need legal counsel to look at, and that would be on like the health department. I think that might be a different, I don't know, how health departments are established. A few years ago, I did some legal research on it, and every city that has a health department in Missouri, it is in their charter. And I believe it's the same with counties. There aren't very many city health departments.
Jackie,
so that might be something we might need to look at separately.
I can weigh in on that. To get a health department, you have to petition the state for what's called a recognition as a local public health agency, LPHA. And you are correct. When you petition them for that, they kind of look at you like you've got 3 eyes, because there are not many cities. Most jurisdictions around the state, this is being handled at a countywide level.
Yeah. Or in combination with city and county.
Or, yeah, a joint city-county function.
Yeah. So, I mean, that one I'm not sure about. I'd like to get Mr. Cover, Mr. Langford's thoughts on health department when we get there. But generally, I'm going to argue, I guess, in favor of moving almost every department out of the charter and ask the city council to put it in their code or however they see fit to establish different departments.
Well, does the city council have a code? Does the city council have a code?
The code of ordinances?
Is that what you're saying? They would establish departments by ordinances?
I believe that's what.
sheet,
I mean,
it shouldn't matter it.
I understand that there's a lot of flexibility, but I don't think the city would want to have a fire department or police department. I mean, that sounds logical to me. I mean,
I could see addressing the function rather than the actual department. That it would mandate that this, in my opinion, it'd be important that we, in the charter, that the council and the city manager would have the responsibility to ensure public safety and through fire and police and things like that, and also the inner workings of the city. And I think if it's in a code of ordinances, then adjustments can be made outside of the process of it all going to the general election. And I think that is what's so cumbersome, I believe. And in some cases, the city's able to hide behind a charter, and also the citizens are able to say, charter violation, charter violation. And I think what needs to happen is that you be on a lower level than the city charter. That makes sense? I think they do have the function, the responsibility for the function, and not necessarily in name.
I could see certain departments explained in here, maybe just a statement of what that is, and it's not all encompassing or the only ones we have.
Mm-hmm.
But the more detail should be in the code or whatever out of this document. Because it almost reads like a personnel handbook.
Yeah, that's a good thought. As long as we're careful that we don't have the situation like Mr. Walker described, where they've gone from Public Works to combining agencies that they call something different that are still performing the same function. And I don't know that the charter has to say the city shall provide public safety. I didn't find that in the couple of charters that I looked at. It's possible. Like I said, Lee Summit has no departments at all,
I
except
don't think
law
it's in the
department.
model at all.
Yeah, model does.
No, I don't think so either. But I think this is a really important article that we need to. I'm going to ask that before our next meeting, everyone put some thought into it and look at the model charter and then any other city charters in Missouri, and see how they handle that.
Jackie, could you maybe send Lindsay the Lee Summit model where we can look at that, what they have on chapter 2 there?
I think Lindsay sent that out.
I did.
A link to it.
Yeah, here's Lisa.
Sorry.
I don't know what page, but we got probably Article 5, page 10.
While we're looking that up and talking about the next meeting is on Election Day. Is that going to impact April 4th?
That's a good point.
I'm going to be out. I'll be working the elections. I didn't know if that was going to impact anybody else.
And I'll be out of town that day. I would love to be here in person, but
Yeah,
Jackie's telling us that she can.
I don't think we should have it on Election Day.
Third and fourth, it whatever.
I'm just throwing this out, but would we maybe want to move it to the 11th? So then we'd have meetings 2 weeks in a row. The 11th and 18th. I don't know if the city's able to accommodate that.
Just a second. I'm accidentally opening.
Okay.
For a minute.
And they do just talk about enforcement, but
Jack, you said what days? I'm sorry.
The 11th?
The 11th, maybe move it to the 11th.
The 11th and then the 18th.
Instead of the 4th, move it, yeah.
can check and see if this room is available.
Okay. Do you want to get back to us on that?
Yes.
Okay. And maybe, and if it's not, we might have to do a poll and see what works for all the members. So I'd like to have everyone there, if possible.
I wanted to go back to some comments you guys were making over here about if you didn't identify city departments, but you did identify department functions. Is that?
I was just trying to address.
Yeah. What were? Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Well, I gave that as an alternative.
Okay.
If we didn't have it outlined in the charter, that maybe we could just identify the functions and how it's managed would still be up to Mr. Walker and the council.
So, take the police department just as an example. What would you say? What would the function of the police department then?
Safety.
Public safety.
So you would say there will be a police department and their function is public safety?
No. I would say that the part of the council's responsibility would be to provide public safety, whether it be a police, I don't know how the verbiage would go.
Okay.
And it would be fire. And,
That's what I was trying to understand.
right.
Okay. So go ahead.
These summits, we're looking at it right now. And it actually does what you're speaking of. It talks about appoint and remove. It doesn't specify police department, but it says, and I just now looked at it, so I'm sure I'm not speaking thoroughly, but it does say, deems necessary for the good of the city, suspend or remove, yada yada. So it's all in there for the good of the city, and then it's administrate departments, attend meetings, enforce all the laws, budget, capital, all the things that is the business owner's job of operating the city.
I wasn't taking credit for an innovative thought. I also read that.
He was reading.
And it just came back to me. You know how.
But to answer your question, that's kind of what they're spelling
Okay.
out right here.
Okay.
And it still leaves the city and city manager with the ability to manage the manager.
Well, I probably didn't state my question very well, but, I understand that the city needs flexibility, city manager needs flexibility, and maybe the old city charter doesn't work in a lot of respects, but then it would seem like the basic fire, police, that I was reading the police language and the fire department language, and it's not very much. It said there'll be a police department, there'll be a chief, and the same thing with the fire department, there's a fire chief, and then basically it describes what the fire department's supposed to do in about 5 sentences. And it would seem like those departments are essential, that you would always want them, need them, and the flexibility may be needed in other departments.
And let me be clear, I'm not going to advocate for this, but I'm aware of other cities that have created a public safety department, that have a public safety director. So instead of having a police chief and a fire chief, and and under today's charter, we wouldn't even be able to have that conversation because we're told to have these two separate, segregated departments. Well, like I said, I'm not going to advocate for it here, but I'm just, we're unable to have those conversations. Yeah, right, yeah, right.
So I'm thinking about that also.
Yeah, correct.
We do want to have some firemen.
Yeah, that'd be ideal. Be ideal.
So that was kind of where I was going with it.
Certainly.
So, no, this isn't a one-way conversation. I would have your take on that.
I think the ideal charter vests in the council the ability to adjust those departments, to provide for those basic services. And maybe, as Mr. McDonald said, that's defined. I go back to the United States Constitution where it talks about the core functions, providing for the common defense, et cetera, et cetera. in my opinion, it is helpful to give the council that latitude and authority to determine, year to year, decade to decade, generation to generation, what is the most economical and efficient and innovative way to provide those services, not to hem yourself in with traditional names or nomenclature of departments.
Yeah.
I think we've
agree.
already
And
dealt with this
also-
situation today with about paper versus digital. I think there's many examples like that where it hasn't been updated in years, and we just need to acknowledge that.
And do we, our function as the Charter Review Commission, do we have the expertise to go in and look at how departments are run? I don't know anything about utilities or many of the departments, but I do think we've been given, charged with the duty to craft a better charter. And I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to get rid of any department, because I don't want to, and I don't think that's our function.
I'm gonna set the police department. You
Well, I think that's probably important to reiterate what our chairperson just said, and that is that she has no intention, and I think I can speak for this group, is that we're not looking to make those type of changes. But while we don't have the expertise to run those departments, we do have an expertise as a citizen to expect our city manager and our city council to be as efficient as possible. We do expect that. We should expect that.
Well, it sounds like this hamstrings the departments at times as well. So they're not able to be as efficient and nimble and, adjust to the market as needed either.
Right.
It's a two-way road here.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, I would also point out, that at some juncture, I don't remember the exact year, but the council deemed it advisable to bring on the water department as a public service, to acquire that from a private holder and make that a public utility. That's an example of something that was not enumerated specifically in the charter, but the council made the determination that that was going to be in the best interest of serving the community. So these things go both ways. There are new services that come along that perhaps make sense to bring on.
Right.
There are other opportunities to find the more efficient manner to provide the service. So having that flexibility is I think, in my opinion, advisable.
Well, I think we'll be prepared to start dealing with these paragraphs and sections, sections next time we meet. Anything?
Just a few more minutes.
Yes.
Can I ask, I'm jumping ahead, but this is Barney. And you made a comment in your notes to us about this. Give us some ideas about how we resolve this issue regarding reasonable accumulation of surplus regarding the public utility. So, well, no, it's coming up, so I know how to get started.
You had to find the most difficult thing in the charter to talk about, John. Thank you. I appreciate
Let's hire
that.
another consultant.
That you're right. It's coming up, and it's going to be important to discuss. But I can tell you it has been, and Mr. McDonald's far better position, and now Mr. Boatwright as both members of the Public Utility Advisory Board. It's a major flashpoint of, do we need, how much financial resources do we need to operate this utility each year, then to pay debt service, et cetera, versus what is compiling for a wish list in the future. So that's been a I put that in there because that has been a major source of friction, at least in my time at the city.
Well,
Anytime you'd like to discuss, I'd be happy to discuss it.
Shall we?
I'm just now clearing up my ulcer from when I was on the PUAD because of that.
Well, I've got a lot to look forward to.
Good.
Are you looking forward to this? Huh?
Yeah, the ulcer.
No, the ulcer.
Well, John, I'm glad you put it clearly on the radar there. That's good. We'll definitely be talking about it.
Can't wait.
Is there anything else we want to try to do tonight?
I'd also like to skip forward. When it comes to this subject, I would hope that people would be willing to look outside Independence like we've done with Lee Summit and Blue Springs. Springfield, Missouri, in my opinion, has a great idea on dealing with utilities. They don't have a public utility advisory board. I want to do you out of your job. They have a public utility board, and its function is to work in concert with the city council to actually run the operation. The idea of all these, you'll see in Article 3 under for the public utility, a lot of mays. You can request. You can request a subpoena. You can request a study. You can request, and they may. I think we need more than a request. We need to have. They shall have the authority. If you read section or Article 16 of the Springfield City Code.
You have to do that there?
Yes, I do. Would you like to see it?
I like that.
I'll give you my copy.
Could you have Lindsay distribute that?
Lindsay can have wherever she wants of it. There's nothing hiding here. I just want to get away from the disputes that made me hate Mr. Walker. And and at the same time, I think our utilities, for the most part, does a good service for the city. And this is not an attempt to get rid of a department like it's been talked about before. It's actually, I'd also like for this to be circulated. I didn't know I was taking over the meeting tonight, but usually how I do it.
I'll just take it and scan it and email it to everyone.
Okay, good. And this is Article 16, the Board of Public Utilities, and it lays out how they run their utilities. In Springfield, they have, I think Parks is actually under it too, I don't understand that. But they actually handle gas, water, I think some telecommunication. We have a broadband operation that I don't know that most folks know that we actually have, but and electricity. When you get a copy of the rate for kilowatt, we are the highest rate cost per kilowatt in the entire state, and we're actually higher than Evergy, a privately investor owned, and that's just an issue that we have to deal with. I mean, eventually we got to get back in line so that we're competitive, or we'll never get the industry that we hope that we will be attracting to the city of Independence. That's my biggest concern. So I appreciate you folks looking at that and give it a perusal. I think it's a good option for the city to get out of the hole that they're in right now. I'll shut up now.
Very good.
We'll look at it. So before we close out, I wanted to ask again I don't know if Mr. Langford, are you going to be at our next meeting, or do you think it'll be Mr. Cover? Well, anyway, I'd like maybe if you could check on whether health departments should stay in the charter. I don't know that there's anything out there that says yes or no, but maybe just look at it before we cover Article 3.
I can take a look at that, sure.
Okay. Like I said, it may be one of those where there's absolutely no answer to that question.
Jackie?
Yeah.
About the next meeting, it was brought to my attention that the planning commission meets on the 11th, and the city doesn't have the capability to live stream two things at one time. So the 11th and the 25th, the planning commission both meet.
Okay. Do you want to check and see what other days are available and then send out a questionnaire or a poll or something to us?
It's not
Like other days of the week?
Just because that April 4th is the election day and we'd miss a couple of members and we'd like for everyone to be at the meeting.
Okay, so you want to meet sometime in between April 4th and the 18th, or do you just want to pick up on the 18th?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll let you guys decide that. I'm available.
Well, there's only so many Tuesdays before we're supposed to have this done, so I'd hate to pass
Exactly.
that period. I'd just say pick another day.
Yes. At some point, we're going to have to discuss that also. But you're right.
Jackie, I don't know what Mondays look like for this group, but because of the of the election on the 4th, there is no council meeting on Monday, April 3rd. That's being moved to Wednesday, April 5th. So just so the group's advised, there's...
Don't hold up just because we.
Okay.
What
I'll
about
look at the
Thursday
calendar.
instead of Tuesday that week? The 6th instead of 4th.
It doesn't appear that anything's on the city calendar that would prevent it. I will still have to make sure this room is available though.
Jackie, April 6th.
I'm looking. Yeah, that works for me.
April 2nd.
So you check with, see if the room is available.
I will, yeah.
It sounds like if it's available, we'll move our meeting date from the 4th to the 6th. Same time. Anything else? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
I was going to say that.
Thank you all very much.
Who gave the motion?
I did.
Okay, you seconded? Okay, thank you.